inside the studio with us right now. Just finished closing on his new home.
South Jersey, baby.
Dave Sholler, now with the Philadelphia 76ers, who entertaining game last night. Good crowd, good energy in the building. And they fall to the Warriors. You know, I was at the game last year when they played the Warriors. That one, Harrison Barnes had a 3 at the buzzer to beat them. It was like a Saturday afternoon at like 5 o'clock. It was a real weird time for that game last year. But that was a good game again last night. So Dave making his roots back home. You got the job. You've been working, but now you've got a home in the area. So I guess you feel a lot more.
I feel settled, Mike.
Right.
And, it's always good to be back in the Matt Blatt Kia studio. Got my man Josh having a chicken pot pie in between breaks. I mean, it's always so festive here, the 97.3 studios. But no, yesterday's game, I think, Mike and Pete, was a bit of a sign of what's to come. Sold out, 21,000 strong in the building last night. It was a whiteout. We gave out Made in Philadelphia
shirts. Oh, they
T-shirts.
were fantastic.
And it was just a really fun, special atmosphere. And you know, it's been a challenging few weeks as we deal with the injury bug up in Philadelphia. But last night, I think, was a real sign of what's to come. And if you look at that team, and I know you guys are big basketball nuts like I am, the way Golden State moves the basketball, what an impressive team. And you can just see, as Coach Brett Brown said at the end of the game, why they have become the holy grail of basketball. They just do everything right. Even when Steph Curry's held to 0 for 11 from 3, they still find a way.
Yeah, they're fun to watch. The game has changed so much in terms of everything is from the outside in. I mean, they jack threes up constantly. I mean, the game is just different watching them. And you wonder how long they could keep this up. Like, how long can that style of play, work for them?
Well, that's a good question, but when you look at the average age of that team, they're still a relatively young team, and they do things very, very well. They don't play with a true power center, if you will, Mike. Zaza Pachulia is a guy who fits on their team for a variety of reasons, but the guy I came away most impressed with yesterday was Draymond Green. Whether you love him or hate him, and he's a controversial guy, Kevin Hart, who is one of the biggest Sixers fans out there, was yapping at him the entire game, but he's a guy that knows how to rebound. He can get the ball in the right hands of his teammates, and he can score. He's just a really good finesse / bull in a china shop type player.
Kevin Hart's shooting a movie in Philadelphia, right? That's why he keeps showing up.
Yeah, and let's not forget he's also
a Philly guy.
He enjoys Los Angeles as well,
yes.
but he is still.
I think our Damian Musiani is in that Kevin Hart flick.
Excellent.
I think he's got a little bit of a speaking role or small role in that. We'll have to ask Damian a little bit later when he's back for 3 from the guys, but the atmosphere is definitely changing in the building. And, I said on Friday's show, and it has carried over, that I think the Sixers could be the most polarizing discussion in almost all of sports. Like, you say something about them, write something about them, and you were getting a 50-50 split of yes or no, in agreement or disagreement. I've never seen a story that is so both sides of the fence with hard line, like no give or take from either side. It's unbelievable. It's got to be an odd situation where, you have these constituents who are so happy, so on board, and then the other part of your constituents that are so disgruntled and so against. And, in your job as, PR communications, I guess you have to see that. You have to realize that there is much like the country, there's a divide in Sixers fans.
Yeah, that's a fair analogy that you make there. It's been an interesting first 90 days back on the job. There's been
the first 100 days in office for Dave Sholler, making the Sixers great again.
Are you addressing the Sixers Nation tonight?
Yeah, I feel like I need to have like a presidential point at my constituents. The reality is, though, guys, I do think that it stems from passion. I think people see what this team can be, and regardless of what your thought process is right now, I do believe when we get this team 100% healthy, we are incredibly well positioned for the future. And, let's be transparent here, guys, and that's the key word in Philadelphia right now. When I got here 90 days ago, there were people questioning whether certain players on this team, TJ McConnell, Robert Covington, players like that, even belonged in the NBA. That question has been answered. That question on the floor has been answered. So I think when you look at the composition of this team, a healthy Ben Simmons next year, a healthy Joel Embiid, Dario Saric, who I think has been playing out of his mind, There's some really good key cornerstone pieces. I think we'll be well positioned in the draft. I think Brian, our two-time Executive of the Year, Brian Colangelo, has done a fantastic job doing that. I understand there's been some controversy and some hot opinions in this era of the hot
Are you a doctor?
I am not a doctor, Pete Thompson, but I do play one on TV. I still think it goes back to that central focus, which is I think we're incredibly well positioned for moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about, and by the way, Dave is with us in studio. We're going to talk about the Stop the Heroin walk that we've been talking about, and you've been hearing promos for. We're going to get more information on that because I certainly want that message to get out there. But, as Dave's role with the 76ers, there has been a lot of disgruntled people, I guess you could say. And I don't even know that forget Brian's job. Okay. He makes a trade, whether you like the trade or you don't like the trade, that's irrelevant. He's in a position where he has to make a move. Everybody makes moves you either like or you don't like, but you mentioned transparent. And I guess in your role, in your job, that is something that is difficult at times. And I think a lot of people, you mentioned a healthy Embiid and Simmons, and with this whole process, I guess some people, the negative side of it is their response is to put faith in guys who seemingly are always hurt is very hard to buy into. You know what I mean? So it really makes that difficult. But the transparency and to say, look, this guy's hurt or not hurt. And in today's basketball, it almost seems that organizations have an acceptance of losing. Like, not just the Sixers, everybody. The NBA rules almost suggest and incentivize that front offices are better off losing. And that's got to be a tough thing for someone in your position to try to sell and make look good to fan bases who are old school and say, you play to win. But the rules suggest losing is almost better.
I understand where you're going with that, and it's been a popular, talked about theme. The reality is I can only speak to my experience here in the first 90 days, and I can tell you this, whether it's our executive management or the people that I go into the trenches with every day, no one in our offices is content with losing, and no one in our offices is content with this term that's been popularized, which is called tanking. I think the reality is we have had some real difficulties with injuries, but when you look at the formative years of athletes between the ages of 19 and 22, you do want to be conservative in their recovery. Ben's injury was rather serious, and we want to make sure that he's long-term healthy and able to contribute for this team. The same goes for Joel. I understand the frustration in terms of how we've communicated some of the injuries, but again, going back to the point about transparency, we want to make sure that we're giving access to the information that at the time is most accurate and well-positioned. When you look at the Sixers right now, I get that conversation that you're articulating, Mike. And it is challenging, and it is hard.
I don't blame the Sixers. I've said before, I think this is not a Sixers issue. This is an NBA issue.
Got it.
The Sixers, Sam brought it to the forefront, exposed it, and the NBA didn't like it. That, yes, our league is set up that if you lose, you're better off.
It is, but I also think...
Because if you're the Lakers right now, you're Dave Sholler, you work for the Lakers. Okay, or you're Brian Colangelo, I guess, working for the Lakers. You don't want to win because then they lose their pick to you. What benefit do they get of winning any games? It's terrible.
I get where you're going.
And I understand, by the way, what you're saying. No one is content with losing. This whole thing was because you're not content with being mediocre and losing. This is all done trying to get the hands on the best players so that you don't have to go through mediocrity and losing any longer.
Yeah, and that's fair. And I think if you look at drafts in general in sports, whether it's NFL, NBA, NHL, the draft is by no means a certainty.
There's no guarantees.
There are no guarantees, and I think we've seen that in other leagues and other teams. So I hear your argument, but I can tell you right now the pulse in Philadelphia at the 76ers' new offices in Camden, we're excited by where we're heading. We understand the last few weeks have been tumultuous, and we understand the injury bug has bitten us hard, but we feel like when we get this thing all together and we head into this offseason, we're going to be incredibly well-positioned. And again, it's not like we're not winning games.
Yeah.
We have... the last 3 seasons.
Hey, by the way, I've been accused of being on your payroll, so
I'm not. I'm glad you finally come out and admit that. No,
I work for food.
I think Mike.
Josh ate it though. The pot pie was your
right. That was supposed to be my food, Josh.
I think, Mike, the picture that you're painting, I think, is from a realist perspective, and you understand the landscape of this thing. No one is walking into this scenario going, I hope we have guys that can't contribute on the floor. It's just been a situation where these injuries and the formative years of our players are such that it requires a conservative approach. You look at the Ben Simmons injury in particular, and we just want to make sure this guy can have a long, formidable career.
Well, Mark Jackson was on with us last week.
Great guy.
And Mark had the same injury and said, look, you could walk and do things after X amount of weeks. I think he said 6 or 7 weeks. Mm-hmm. So the problem was I went out and played, and then I broke it again.
Yes.
And he said for some reason, don't know why, and this has been talked by the medical people, the high rate of re-injury on that particular. Yep. So he said, I have no problem having gone through that injury that this guy has taken so long. And quite frankly, I don't have the problem with the fact, you wish, do we wish that it was more transparent and say, look, this guy's just not going to play, blah, 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 blah. And maybe you don't know that he can't play. And I think with that injury, it is so tricky that you just don't know. But it's unfortunate that January seemed like it was such a positive month, and then December seemed like everything was kind of like going right back down the hill of what happened to January. It just seemed like it was yesterday. But that being said, I think no one is going to be able to clean up the divide until winning consistently starts to happen, right? I mean,
of course, this is a city of high expectations, and we take those high expectations seriously, and it's a big part of why I came home, Mike. I understand the pressure in this town, and we want to win. And I think if you just look at last night's game and the play of Dario, the play of Rashawn Holmes, there are some really nice players on this team. And there was a debate earlier. I saw one of the Comcast Sportsnet guys arguing with another talk show host about Dario Saric and where you think he plays. Is he a complementary piece or is he a cornerstone piece? I'll put the question on you, Mike. You've seen how this guy has played. He's got tremendous upside. Brett Brown, I think, paid him the ultimate compliment in just saying, I love Dario Saric. And I agree, the guy does it. He's rugged. He's tough. He has some finesse about him when he gets the ball in his hands. He's the type of guy in Philadelphia. When you talk about a Philadelphia player, Dario Saric is that guy.
I originally, looked at a guy that, in the prime of his career is an 11-point, 9 rebound, sliding on the floor, tips, putbacks. As he has now played, he reminds me of the kid who comes over here, doesn't speak the language, is really quiet, and then became the most popular kid in the room. And because he became so much more comfortable with his surroundings, that he allowed his personality to come out, and now and that's his talent. He is more comfortable in his surroundings, and now his talent is coming out, and it is superseding everybody else's. And realistically, I said this the other day, the Sixers under Sam, I guess, had 5 first-round picks. You had Michael, Noel, Ja,
Ben,
Joel, and Dario. 5.
Yep.
Of those 5, if you end up getting 2, you've done good. Yep. And then you add Ben, so 6. If you get 3 out of 6 draft picks in today's landscape that have made it and that are impactful players, you're way ahead of the game. I think that is something that gets lost because you're not winning fast enough. Okay, now you have all these players, but you're still not winning. So people just have a hard time understanding that.
And then you find some players, too. I mean, if you're going to talk about Saric, you have to talk about T.J. McConnell because that's like the Batman and Robin pairing right there. And you talk about the kid, Mike, that maybe doesn't speak the language initially. Well, I don't know what language they speak, but it's basically like brothers. Yep. Like, hey, I may come from this country and you come from this school and I have this experience, but guess what? When we get on the court, we're like brothers. And it's funny because fans would think like they don't like each other. They poured a cup of water on their head. No, they're just goofing around like brothers, like you and I do. And that has a lot to do. Chemistry has a lot to do. Even Nerlens Noel, who maybe wasn't so happy coming out of training camp. Where does that come from, Dave? That cohesiveness and that chemistry, does that come from Brett? Does that start at the top down?
Yep. I'll give you 2 words. It's culture and it's confidence. And the culture has been driven by, Brian and Brett. I think they've done a fantastic job getting good culture guys, good fits for the locker room. And if there was one takeaway through this point in the season, almost, 60 games now, it's confidence. And whether that was what Joel brought to this team, whether it's what Dario's brought to this team believes not only in itself but in each other. And when you talk about that brotherhood, it's very palpable when you walk in that locker room. There's no divide. There's no corner of veterans, sequestering themselves away from the rookies. It's a family-like atmosphere. And I think Brett Brown has done a fantastic job. I'm not sure there are many coaches out there that could have endured what he endured and kept the faith and kept the outlook. And in my 90 days, I can't tell you how impressed I am with the culture of the 76ers organization inside that locker room.
So a couple of minutes ago, you mentioned the offices in Camden and,
Yes.
and that facility in Camden. How does that help the Sixers organization to bring guys in?
It's fantastic. I think it's the best complex in all of sports. And I think I told Mike this story before. When I was still with the UFC, we were in the process of building our own facility. And I have toured some of the best facilities in the world, whether it be the Seattle Seahawks facility right on the water up there in Washington. I've been all over the world. I've seen the Giants facility, the Eagles facility, the Cowboys, you name it, I've been there. The Sixers nailed it. When you talk about a world-class training facility, 125,000 square feet of the best in sports performance and nutrition, it's all there. Not only do I think it's a fantastic resource for our staff and for our athletes, I think it's an incredible recruiting tool. If you're a pending free agent and you come to Philadelphia and you know that you can play with Joel and Dario and Ben and whoever else is added to this fold, and you have access to the best facility in the sport, pretty darn good tool.
Yeah, no longer do you have to gloss that over. You talk about the UFC and your job there. I saw you posted that picture the other day, like the timeline memories that come up, and you're standing right between Ronda Rousey and who was the other fighter?
That was Kat Zingano.
Right, and you're standing there like, boy, have times changed. How is your day-to-day role different? What's it like compared to what you were doing in the UFC?
I'll tell you what, like I've been so fortunate again, and I tell this story every time I'm on the air, but sorry, South Jersey listeners. Mike and I started together in a broom closet in Linwood, New Jersey, doing a radio show. So sometimes I do have to pinch myself, and I hate to get warm and fuzzy, but it's the reality of it. You know, I go from a situation where I was able to climb the ranks at the UFC and be a part of Conor McGregor mania and Ronda Rousey mania and just the overall explosion of the UFC to now being in the locker room with Joel Embiid and watching Ben recover and watching these young players emerge. It's pretty cool for a kid from Egg Harbor Township to be able to continue to do that, and I'm very fortunate. I hate the phrase self-made. I don't think anybody's self-made, and I am where I am today because of this community and the people that believed me when I was a young kid, especially some guy named Mike Gill who was like, yeah, come work for free in this broom closet with me in Linwood.
And showed up every morning.
That's right.
What was that, like 5:30 I think we got there?
I think you got there before I did.
Yeah.
You know, that show went on the air at 6. And
that
he
was a
beat
younger
already.
Mike Gill. You were out late in the Summers Point scene.
Yeah, right. Those were some the morning show, and I've never really seen eye to eye.
And mornings and I never see eye to eye.
Do you remember who our
unless I
first
haven't
big
gone to
guest
bed
was?
yet.
You remember who our first big guest was? I remember this like it was yesterday. Ken Hitchcock.
How about it? Ken Hitchcock.
Hitch.
Our guy Zach Hill from the Flyers made that possible.
Now was that skinny Hitch or big Hitch?
Good question. I don't remember that one.
That was that was a long time ago, man. That was what was that, 2004-ish, sometime 2003, 2004.
Yeah.
We were doing that, but so you look at this organization kind of moving forward. There's, as we kind of talked about, there is a divide. We've got people texting in right now, basically, not very supportive of Brian, that he has no idea what this franchise is looking for. I equated the other day to Back to the Future. Sam had the idea for the Gray Sports Almanac as Marty. Old Biff got his hands on it, right?
Where the heck
Is
is
this
he
the
going?
first time you're hearing this?
This is the first.
It's pretty fun. Wait for it. It'll pay off at the end.
Gillology.
So Marty had the idea for this almanac. He's in 1955. Look, I got the almanac. I can bring it back and become rich. So that's his idea. Well, then old Biff steals his idea, and now we're in like an alternate 1985 where Sam's plan basically got halted after the third year, and now you have some people wonder, does Brian get 3 years to try to do what he wants to do? Sam got his 3 years. The ownership's still the same. There's a lot of that still in place. So, this plan seems like it has an alternate kind of looping here off. There's as he said, a jumping off point.
I wish you folks listening could see Mike. He is so demonstrative right now in how he's describing this process. I think to answer your question, Mike, this offseason is going to be a big offseason for us, not only in player health, but where we fall in the draft. Do we have the opportunity to get the Lakers pick? Is there a swap involved with the Sacramento pick? And then what do we look like in free agency? And who are the strategic players we can add to really meld in with the current players we have? I think this offseason is very, very big for us. And I also think the next 20 games are big. Let's see what we have on this roster. I think there are some players that have really carved out roles for themselves. There's just a variety of different scenarios, but I think right now the long-term health of some of our core players and the continued development of guys like Dario Saric are what we're focused on. I will say this about Brian Colangelo. His team of scouts have been working incredibly diligent to find the next wave of prospects. And I forget who said it the other day. It might have been right here on your show. This is viewed as one of the deepest draft classes coming up in perhaps, since the LeBron year? What was that, 2003, Mike?
Yeah.
So we're looking very well into the future here and trying to make sure they have a good plan. To answer your question directly, I think we can only look at what's right in front of us, and that's this offseason and planning accordingly.
Yeah, and then you get that question from a lot of the fans wondering, okay, when does drafting in the lottery, when is like that getting old?
Good question.
Fair
question. Yeah, and I think...
And I know, like, this isn't like relatively your department. You're not in scouting. You're not in the, but I'm sure that you have to sit down with a lot of these guys to massage some things in terms of getting the information out there.
That's fair. I definitely hear what you're saying. I think if you take a look at some of the unfortunate situations we've had with injuries, they are what they are. Injuries are a very real part of sports. I want to see this team healthy, and I want to see what we're able to do, and I think that is on the horizon in the very near future. I understand the frustrations with some of the setbacks, but I do still, again, think we're really well positioned, and I like what we're doing. We have the right coach. We have the right young players, and you look at Brian's track record as two-time executive of the year with the Raptors and the Suns. We've got a damn good organization, and now it's just about preparing for not only the immediate future, but how this organization is a contender for the next decade.
Twitter and social media are so much a part of what we are now. When you see a tweet that says the NBA just announced the draft second round has been renamed, the 76ers are on the clock, how do you react to both the positive, the funny, the negative,
Well, I think social media has changed how we all engage in life. I mean, you guys could probably do a whole hour simply reacting to commentary on social media. Some of it great, some of it bad, some of them calling you names, some of them praising you, all in you and all your glory. When I hear that phrase, I'll just say one thing. I don't know, to Mike's earlier point, that there's ever been a greater value in professional sports on drafts. And a lot of teams are looking at reloading for the future through the drafts. We've got a team across the street, a team I'm passionate about, the Philadelphia Eagles, that right now are waiting for whether it's going to be heads or tails in the value of 14 versus 15. And I'm sure you guys both have your theories on who would be there at 14 versus 15. The value of the draft is such that having assets in the second round or the first round or in future drafts, it does give you the ability to be players in other deals. So I understand it.
How about the people who hate hearing the word assets?
In what regard?
You get these guys who are enough with the word assets. I'm sick of hearing the assets. At some point, assets, there's a lot of people who are just, because that word has been thrown around so much, but as you're kind of saying that the direction of the league is valuing these assets more and more and more, where the fans are saying, I want to see players. I don't care about these things that are not tangible in my hand.
That's fair. Okay, we'll flip it to players. Last night, we had two key contributors who were drafted in the second round, Draymond Green and Rashawn Holmes. Now, obviously, two opposite ends of the spectrum. One has been established, won a championship, one is on the up and up. But it's not like you can't find talent in the second round. Do you get all of your talent from the second round? Not necessarily, but I do think there's value in those picks. The word assets, I get it. We have almost normalized it in the world of professional sports, but it's not demeaning. We're not demeaning that phrase. It's just, a popular term when you start talking about the trades and what assets you have to really mobilize and rally your team around. So I think when you look at this upcoming draft, we're incredibly well positioned, whether you like the swap rights with Sacramento, what could happen with the Lakers pick, where we fall in the lottery or out of the lottery. There's a lot of interesting scenarios.
You guys sit in a room and watch Lakers games at night?
No. I'll tell you, the toughest adjustment since moving back from Vegas, though, is how late some of those games start.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I'm trying to watch these West Coast teams. And, does Russ get another triple-double, and I'm barely awake.
All right, Dave Sholler, Vice President of Communications of the Philadelphia 76ers, in our studio right now. When we come back, Dave has something that he is a part of, and we are partnering with him in this, and we'll tell you more about that coming up on the other side. And in the studio with us from the Philadelphia 76ers, he's their VP of Communications. That's Dave Sholler, formerly from the UFC, as he kind of talked about how his day-to-day is a little different. One thing about, real quick before we get into Stop the Heroin here, Brian, I'm wondering if he has said, like, this isn't Toronto or Phoenix, man. They really care a lot more about their teams than they do in Toronto or Phoenix. I mean, is that something that he has kind of been open to, like eye-opening, like how much more media coverage and how much more the fans are into it?
I think he hasn't said it directly, but I think I can put it in the words for you. The fans and the media in this market hang on your every word, and I think the key here is just being as upfront as you can be with understanding that the parameters are what they are. And it's definitely an interesting market, but I love it. I love the passion of the fan base here. If they weren't this passionate, they wouldn't care, and the center wouldn't be like what it was last night. So It's all fair game.
Yeah, well, one of the things that you are in for today, and you've been hearing the promos running and us talking about March 25th, Dave will give us a little insight and background on Stop the Heroin, the campaign that he put together with the Stop the Heroin people. March 25th at the Boardwalk in Atlantic City. Dave, give us a little background on that and how the listeners can get involved.
For sure. So Stop the Heroin is an organization that was founded by two Egg Harbor Township residents, Bill and Tammy Schminke, along with Kanetta Fabing, who lives in Atlantic City. And it's an organization that is trying to provide sober living opportunities for addicts battling against this terrible heroin epidemic that's taken over our area. And I know that it maybe hasn't gotten the news coverage that it deserves, but from a personal perspective, Mike, just in the last month alone, I've lost 5 friends that I grew up with in high school and some that I went to college with that have been battling against this opiate addiction. And Bill, Tammy, and Kanetta have done a fantastic job. Just in the last 10 months of Stop the Heroin's existence, they have sent 50 local residents to sobriety houses, sober living facilities where they can continue their fight against addiction. And just to show you how powerful sober living facilities are, Johns Hopkins, which is one of the most respected medical facilities in all the world, they did a study, and they said that addicts that enter into sober living facilities are 10 times more likely to stay clean if they enter into sober living right out of your standard rehab program. So 10 times more likely. And it's a fight that you hear a lot about, Mike and Pete. You hear Chris Christie talking about how he's committing, the end of his term to fighting against drug addiction. And so much of this, and Josh was saying this off the air, it's not about just talking about it. It's about rallying together on Saturday, March 25th on the Atlantic City Boardwalk. All of our information is at stoptheheroin.org. We're raising money to send more South Jersey residents into sober living facilities so they can continue the fight. I will be there. Mayor Don Guardian will be there, and a slew of other elected officials and great community residents. I can't say thanks enough to you guys in Town Square Media for once again showing how committed you are to South Jersey.
Yeah, and if the people want to walk that day or make some sort of donation, what can they do to try to help the cause?
Well, I'm glad you said that, Mike, because it is a situation where we need to raise money. And Stop the Heroin is a 501(c) organization. Your contributions are tax deductible. Go to stoptheheroin.org. On March 25th, registration will start at 8 a.m. We'll start the speaker presentations around 9, and then the walk starts at 10:30. We'll go a little over a mile together. As of right now, we're expecting thousands from the local community. And the one thing, Mike and Pete, I know you guys are so well invested in this community. These stories and addiction, it doesn't discriminate. It can hit the wealthiest of the wealthy or the folks that are scraping together their means every single day. Addiction is a very, very real thing in our community. And one of the things that I love about working for the 76ers organization is that they have empowered all of us as employees to get out in the community. They actually tell us, don't be in the office when we're not playing basketball. Go do tangible, meaningful things in the community. So when you talk about why you came home, for an organization like that, South Jersey needs folks like us to rally together. This is an incredible area to raise your families, and so many local businesses have rallied together for this event on March 25th. guys like Jason Goldfarb and Your Dark Entertainment, a local firm here that does entertainment booking. The Philadelphia 76ers have raffle items. The Flyers have raffle items. So many local businesses. So come with us, walk, make a small contribution, and help us take back South Jersey from this addiction epidemic that's, taking our lives and of our friends and family.
Dave Sholler with us. And Dave, when you talk about the disease doesn't discriminate, I think that I look at the paper. I read the paper every day, the actual hard copy of the paper. Call me old school, call me old, that's fine.
Mark Melhorn would appreciate you saying that.
I am 46 years old, right? And I never thought I'd turn into my father, but I do kind of scan the obituaries, and I look, even though I'm not 50 yet, I look at the obituaries, and whenever I see an obituary that's for someone like younger than 30, aka 22, 25, 28, and I think, God, that person's really young. And inevitably, more times than not, there'll be a line in there, so-and-so lost their battle with addiction, lost his battle, lost her battle. Is the stigma coming off and the talking getting better? I'm sure we need more, but it used to be that, like, oh, how did he pass? Oh, he was sick. They wouldn't, you would never post something like that on Facebook.
No.
Or Twitter or Instagram or anything like that. And now it's almost like the flip side of it, where the parents or the family loses someone and they think, my goodness, if I could put that out there, perhaps that helps one person.
You nailed it. And I think Bill Schminke, who started Stop the Heroin, he lost his son, Steven, about a year ago to the heroin epidemic. And he was telling me a story when we met a few weeks ago about when he came up with the name, Stop the Heroin. There were some folks that advised him against using heroin because they thought it was too bold. It was too in your face. But the reality of the situation is heroin is bold. It is in your face, and it's very much in our community. And the only way we're going to be able to rally together is not solely just raising awareness and creating signs and high-fiving. We have to get out there and we have to fight back.
Say the name. Don't bury your head in the sand.
It's so true. And the opioid or the opiate addiction rate in this area is startling. I had a friend that I grew up with in high school. We did lose touch, and I'm upset about that. He lost his life last month. He had 5 kids. He's my age, and I have 2 children, and I can't imagine my kids growing up without me. Now, we don't know what is in our store. I could walk outside today and get hit by a car, but the reality of the situation is those kids will wake up every day without their father because of this terrible epidemic, and it's incumbent upon all of us in South Jersey, and I know it's hard. We got people out in this community that are just scratching to get by. I get it. But we have to get together and try to take this back for our city so that it doesn't get in our schools. And I challenge our local leaders listening to the show, because I know they listen. We need you more than talking about it. We need you there March 25th with guys like Mike Gill and Pete Thompson and myself and Mayor Don Guardian and Bill and Tammy and the leaders in this community. We need to show folks that we're serious about fighting back.
That's Dave Sholler. StopTheHeroin.org is the website. You can check that out, and make sure you do. And there's a button on there. You can donate. Talked about the walk. There's a lot of things, as Dave said, that you can do rather than just kind of say, I know somebody, but you can take some action. And, Dave, the hardest part is, too, as you know, I asked you the other day, how's everything going? You getting, this kind of reaction, and it's everything's going good, but, there's always a but where you need people to do a little bit more, because if we all just kind of sit around and talk about it, you're not getting enough done.
It's true, and I think it's very easy in this society, and I get it, because we are all very busy, probably busier than we've ever been, to kind of look the other way and not really necessarily be concerned with other people's business, but it's our business. Because for me, as I'm raising young children in this area, I don't want to see heroin in our schools, and the folks that are dealing this stuff understand that they're dealing stuff that's fatal. There are kids in our streets today that are taking heroin with no understanding that it could be their final day. And it's such a terrible drug. It's such a terrible epidemic that's taking over this area. And I'm glad that folks like Chris Christie are stepping up and talking about it. But let's get out there and fight back, and let's do it. And let's not just be talkers. Let's be doers. And that's what I love about the folks here at Town Square Media. Every time since I've been home, 4 or 5 months now, that I've said, let's get together, you guys and Mike Rubel and Joe and everybody here at this station rally behind this community. And I know it's because you guys care, so thank you. Stop the Heroin is a fantastic organization. They don't take one single penny for profit. It all goes to getting addicts into sober living facilities. And in this day and age, that is a very, very commendable task.
Well, Dave, Good stuff. We'll tweet that link out so people can have it as well. StopTheHeroin.org. March the 25th, and we'll make sure we update people. We have the promo, of course, that you'll continue to hear, and you can read more information on the website, StopTheHeroin.org. And by the way, the Sixers back tomorrow night. You're not going to Miami?
I am. I missed out on the Miami, but it's Miami outside today. It's like 78 degrees. I brought Vegas with me. You're welcome.
There you go. Thanks, Dave, and we'll
Thanks,
have plenty
guys.
more on this.